So first, high level, what are webhooks and how do they function? So a webhook is something, and you've probably heard this term thrown around, even if you're not vastly knowledgeable about it yet at this point. But the idea behind a webhook is any application, generally like a web application or a some web application, has an API that sits on top of it. So if you've utilized Smart Connect to this point, you know we've got a REST API or a REST connector in there that allows us to connect to different REST APIs that we don't have a dedicated connector for. Now, beyond a product just having a REST API, or as part of it, they might have something they call webhooks. So what webhooks are is it allows other external applications like Smart Connect to tie into them or to subscribe to them. The term you're going to use here a lot is the term subscribe. Subscribe to a webhook so that if a particular event occurs in that application, you're going to see that webhook, well, what it's going to do, whether you see it or not, that webhook is going to push a notification out to any system that's subscribed to it. So in our case, with Smart Connect, if we're subscribing to these different events and these different webhooks, when that criteria is met or when that event occurs in that web application, it's going to do a push notification to us, to part of our product to say, hey, this occurred, here's the data, or here's like the reference or key or something, so that we know that an event has happened and we need to do something about it. Now, how this fits into Smart Connect, if I've got, there we go. How this fits into Smart Connect and how it relates to what we have already is, I talked about a little bit, we've got the REST connector in there that allows us to connect to these different REST APIs. Up to this point, we've always had to query that API and actually pull that data out. And that kind of ties into the third point on here as well, is up to this point, like if we're connecting to a Shopify or a Zendesk or Magento or you name it, something with the REST API, we've always had to go and set up a scheduled process to go ahead and pull that data down. So then it relies on us going ahead and trying to filter that request to say, all right, only return me records that meet this criteria, or only return me records that have changed in the last 10 minutes or last day. What webhooks allow us to do, and the support we have now, is rather than us having to pull that data, we can now go ahead and allow it to send that push request to us and say, hey, this record has changed. Let's go ahead and run an integration based off of that. So if you've utilized Smart Connect a lot to this point, you'll know that we have real-time data sources and real-time triggers for a lot of our dedicated connections. So if you're working with SQL, Business Central, CRM, Salesforce, NetSuite, etc., we've got those real-time triggers built in there when you build your data source. Webhooks are essentially the real-time data source or real-time trigger for our generic REST API connector. So this opens up a whole nother window of, or a whole nother path in terms of how you design integrations. They can now be built more in a way that's more similar to how you build them with our dedicated connectors, because you can do these real-time types of interaction with that data.